project management, building a business, building a brand, all those other things, which are, as we know, the more important side that really help people save huge quantities of time. That's kind of come into the Nick Church Creative Academy, which is because that's what people buy, you know, as we now know.
Hello and welcome to Camera Central Podcast. Today I have Nick Church on with me, and we're going to be talking a little bit about what he does in general. Anyway, what do you do in general?
Well, normally take photos.
Oh, that's good.
And teach people how to take photos. So that's the summary. So
Yeah.
should we end it there? Is that we got
Yeah,
enough?
perfect. I think that's the podcast.
No,
If you enjoyed the video, I should have done this yesterday because it would have been perfect. It's just like start out, it's just like that's the podcast done,
Yeah.
sorted. Anyway,
I'm a photographer at Nick Church Photography and also the founder of Nick Church Creative Academy, which is the training. But my training platform is basically a sort of two halves to my working life, and that's how it splits pretty much evenly these days.
Fair enough. No, it's interesting at the moment to see kind of like creatives who have been at it for a long time. For example, you in the wedding field, but also how they are looking to introduce the sort of like education aspect. So, like, how did that kind of end up forming for you, adding the education onto something which I'm assuming you did first, which was the photography?
Yeah, well, it was like most of us, I like the sound of my own voice. That's probably part of it. But
It's a really smooth voice, to be fair. You got a great voice.
I don't know about that. I can't bear listening to myself back. I haven't actually been in the photography field for, that long, really. Although every time I tell the story, it does get a bit longer. But I started I didn't get a camera until 2015. So I was fully in the software industry. I'd sort of got promoted into sort of corporate level positions and things, and I found that I just stopped loving it. There was no creativity anymore in sort of hiring and recruiting and firing people. So I got a camera, and I thought I'm going to learn how to do photography, and that was about 2015, and I just suddenly fell in love with it completely, like instantly. And then I was just taking photos to and from work because I'm based in Bristol, so lots of sort of fairly iconic scenes and things, and started selling prints in art fairs and sort of cafes and things like that, just to and when you get some money to buy a lens from stuff you've done, it's a real buzz, so I got a bit addicted to that kind of earning from creativity. Anyway, someone was a woman was buying a print, and she was looking for some money, and she said, we're getting married next year. I don't suppose you do wedding photography. And in my head, I was thinking, well, of course not, because I've only just started photography. I've got a really busy, like 60-hour corporate day job, and I don't have enough kit. But my mouth completely stitched me up, and I went, yes, absolutely, I can do that. And so before I knew it, I had sort of 2 or 3 or 4 weddings booked in, and I became a wedding photographer completely by accident. And over the next couple of years, that progressed to the point where I thought, right, I've like the last year I was working my, let's say, proper job. I did sort of 35 weddings alongside that, and I thought, right, something's got to give here. I can't keep doing these. And so I built up to a point that I could just jump ship and do photography full time, and I've been loving it ever since. And to answer your question about the education, it was, I think, because of the sort of fairly rapid rise in the industry and making I don't want to blame me on trumpet, but a successful photography business. I was on a few podcasts, various places around the world, and all the usual ones. And from that, people started contacting me asking if I would do coaching and training and that sort of thing. So I started that off, and that started this kind of journey of offering education stuff alongside the photography. And that's now sort of in the near future, later sort of spring and summer this year, that's kind of come into the Nick Church Creative Academy, which is a sort of rebrand and more formal offering of all my training stuff. So it's going to be online on a single platform with online courses, as well as doing the one-to-one stuff and the in-person stuff I still do now. So it's going to be expanding it. So that's where we are.
So is it important to actually do learning from other people, or do you reckon you can just do it yourself?
I think it depends who you are. I mean, I personally didn't, I'm pretty good, and I've got a background in physics and maths and IT and coding. So I could work out most stuff to do with the camera, the software, how light works. I kind of had that in my sort of wheelhouse already. So I was very fortunate. So I didn't need it for that particularly. And but I had loads of training through my other career in the
Hmm.
software industry of project management, building a business, building a brand, all those other things, which are, as we know, the more important side
Yes.
of becoming successful as a photographer.
Yeah.
But I found that through my training stuff, some people just learn in different ways. Some people have tried going to YouTube and it just doesn't make any sense to them. And they need a more in-person, maybe slightly calmer environment without all the distractions, and they
Yeah,
can
for
actually
sure.
engage a bit. And so everyone's a bit different, I find.
Yeah, I think although I personally I went to university, I did media tech. It was actually surprisingly a BSc. I don't know why. So I'm actually a Bachelor of Science in Media Technology. Um, and it's one of those, you know, learning was great. You can learn really well off of YouTube, but genuine personal experience with other people
Yep.
help help you along that path. Because I was fortunate enough to be in quite a big creative team,
Hmm.
and we did quite a lot. I even did a little bit of education myself, which is why I find it quite interesting you're doing that. Um, and there's a natural progression to stuff, and learning off of people is ultimately how you become better in general.
Yeah.
So you focus more on the business management within your education kind of like thing, or are you showing them how to do photography as well?
Yeah, a bit of everything. So beginners, I do a beginner photography course as well, which will be going online because it's just more accessible financially
Yeah,
for beginners. Um, Through to advanced photographers that want to get into it as a profession themselves. So
yeah,
there's a whole range of that. My lighting workshops is very popular, Flash, and that's very
yeah,
popular with lots of professionals photographers.
yeah,
There's loads of professional photographers that are incredible photographers. They are just crap at using Flash, and we've all been to that point. And so there's that, and then they've got the business coaching and Lightroom and Photoshop. Photoshop's another area that a lot of very skilled photographers that produce brilliant work in Lightroom just have a block on using Photoshop because it's such a
yeah.
complicated beast. So that's something that's quite popular as
It's
well. And yeah, the
it's
business coaching alongside as well.
yeah, fair enough. It's one of those things that is actually um yeah, like even me as a creative, like if you were to approach me, and like I am very good at editing software in terms of video and stuff like that. I do Lightroom, but Photoshop I can get my head around, but it's always important to learn new skills in this. And perhaps made that point a little bit too much, but like I think it's one of those things where you can only ever add more tools to your basket.
Yeah.
And actually learning from people like yourself, I think is actually a really good idea.
I think
So
there's times where I think, but through all of our work, whatever field of photography you're in, there are times where exactly as you said, Stu, that those having the toolkit that you can go to and you know how to use it doesn't mean to say that you're going to use Photoshop for everything, or you're going to be really fluid in it and you're the most great digital designer ever, digital creator. But if you know how to go in there and you know how to combine images because you've got two
mm,
images that a client wants a combination of both those, you just can't do in Lightroom. It's a pretty useful blooming tool,
oh yeah.
really, to be honest.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure, for sure.
But the education side is interesting on the podcast that I do, the photography pod. We've talked about this a fair bit about what's the difference between that's gone down a more formal education route that you have
Mm.
versus somebody that's just more kind of a just splash themselves into the industry and just
Yeah, for
in at the deep
sure.
end. And the jury's out really what the benefits are. But I reckon for someone that's done a formal education like you have in photography, you've definitely got better knowledge of the history of photography, the history of art, all of
Mm.
the surrounding kind of bits of information that actually contribute to being a well-rounded photographer.
Yeah,
I think you do get that. Whereas I think if you don't get that, you just tend to pick and choose the bits that you need right there and
yeah.
then. And unless you've got a certain mindset to say, well, I know what I know and that's all I need, but for
Mm.
example, I'm always trying to improve, develop, learn more stuff than I know already.
Yeah,
If you
yeah, for
haven't got
sure.
that mindset, I think without the formal education, you can be quite narrow in thinking, well, it's good enough, and you
Yeah.
don't tend to need to go into any other areas. But so it's definitely got advantages in that
Yeah,
area.
for sure. Like I think it kind of goes both ways because like people who don't necessarily have gone through formal education, but I think they still need to understand that they learn because creative fields when it comes to university education in general is like it tends to be not really up to the standard of what's actually currently happening within the industry as
Yeah,
well. For example, when I was actually working there, we did very little on business management, which is massively important if you want to go into professional. kind of like workflows. But also kind of like the current camera technology. We were working with things that are 2, 3, 4 years old. And when it comes to working in the industry these days, although there are some areas which with older tech or whatever, it was like really important, I find, to start embracing more things because
Mm.
at the time it was like DSLRs were just coming in to do video and they were trying to get everyone else to do camcorders. But of course, there's a lot of benefits to using a DSLR because you're getting much better looking footage, and
Mm.
that's what it really matters down to the end of the day.
I
So
think they have that in
education,
education
yeah,
because you've got like a university or college has got a budget for some kit.
yeah,
That probably takes a year to get that passed through. So they've already
mm,
decided what they want. They put the budget, the request forward. That takes a
yeah.
year to get signed off. They buy it. It's got to wait for, it's got to last them 3 years to justify the expense. So you could quite easily be going in and using kit that probably is 2, 3, 4, even 4 years
Yeah,
out of date, from the stuff that's on
no,
the market
no,
now.
exactly.
Just about. Just about.
Camera Centre UK do both new, used, old cameras and everything else in between. So make sure you go over to cameracenteruk.com to check out the latest and greatest in camera technology, but also the old stuff as well. Anyway, let's continue. And you talk about being a coder. They were trying to tell us to learn on 1995 C plus or something like that. They were like, I think they actually said in the lesson that this coding language was actually taken out of a museum so we could use it. And it's just like, you can't really do that to people that want to be in it. They're like, oh, we're going to teach you JavaScript, but then not actually, you know, do anything in order to like it was also at a time where like JavaScript was like didn't have like a promising future and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it was just one of those weird things. Anyway, photography.
Mm.
So aside from we've done quite a bit on the sort of like education side of things, and did your passion come through after that 60-hour week job, or has it been something that you enjoyed when you were a lot younger, and have just continued it over a long time? Because you said, of course, you did it for just like selling photos originally,
Mm.
but is it photography something that you had come to later on, or is it something overall you've enjoyed since you were young?
I've always been artistic, and I love doing art at school. When did art at GCSE, my parents didn't let me do it A level, so they were just they completely vetoed it. So I didn't ever do it, but I carried on doing art in my
Yeah,
as a just a hobby. I used to do pen and ink drawings and things like that. Photography just wasn't really there. But I was always immersed myself in doing art. So I guess I was always working on composition and
yeah,
all of the more visual aspects of photography all the
yeah.
time. I just wasn't actually doing it with the camera. When I got a camera and could very quickly get the technical, be able to create what I had in my mind into being recorded on a sensor, then
Mm.
once I'd overcome that, then I was very quick to sort of pick it up. But so I think you when you are immersing in any form of art, I think you kind of it's like our brains this magic thing where you're picking up skills in the background without even thinking about it. So I remember when the kids were tiny, I did get a DSLR, kept it in auto mode. And then when we had our second child, as everyone does, you didn't bother taking any photos of that one because you can't be bothered because you're too busy. And I
Yeah.
thought, this is crazy. I thought I better sell it. I might as well sell this camera. This was about a year before I started photography
Mm.
properly. I thought I better sell it because it's just been sat in the cupboard for 10 years. Got it out, and then there was a memory card in there, because I'd been using my phone since then.
Yeah.
There was a memory card in the camera. I thought, I mean, look at those images, and I thought, wow, I'd forgotten how much better the photos are with a decent camera. So the idea to sell this bag of this Canon camera and some lenses on eBay just because it was wasted, sitting there, just losing money. I thought, wow, I'm going to buy a new camera with it. So I actually bought a new camera, and that was not at all what I had planned. It was like, I was hoping to make some money rather than start a whole project of spending more money. So that's how I ended up with this Micro Four Thirds Olympus system.
Yeah.
And that's what I used to just walk around and taking photos of Bristol and
Yeah.
stuff. And that's how we started off. Yeah.
Fair enough. So, talking about gear, then that's a great segue, almost perfect segue there. I like that. What kind of camera gear do you use at the moment? Of course, you said Olympus Micro Four Thirds. Just like walking around. Recently, actually checked out the OM3. I don't know if you've seen much about
Mm,
that camera.
yeah.
That was a lot of fun. But what cameras do you use?
I now use my journey was Olympus, and then when I started getting these wedding bookings, the only reason I didn't use it for that was I started to feel self-conscious about turning up with a real small camera, and that was the only reason. And nowadays I wouldn't care about that, and it would have been
No,
so cool
no.
to have it. So I went to a full frame Nikon D750
Yeah.
system, and
Great
then
camera.
yeah, loved it, absolutely loved it, absolutely bulletproof thing. Really loved it. I really missed that. Then in about 2018 or so, I moved to Sony
Yeah.
and with the A7R3, and now I've got two A7 IVs, which I use my all my work. I've got an R3 still that I use for if I do need high resolution. So that's where I am with those. I've recently, I don't know if you find this, whether it's just me one thing about becoming a professional photographer is that I just started taking fewer and fewer pictures of just my own, personal things. It used to
Yeah.
be before it was a job. You get a sunset, right? And I'd be thinking, right, I'm out here, grab my camera, go and take some lovely pictures of sunset. Nowadays, like, oh, nice, oh, forget it, can't be bothered. It would just go into a queue of images to
Yeah.
edit.
Yeah, no, I entirely agree. It's one of the because I do it in such like frequency, just photography in general. I mean, I have like the ability to be able to photograph whatever I really want to, but when it comes to actually being with family and stuff like that, I'm starting to take less and less photos,
Yeah.
which is why I'll get it now. So that's full of stuff that I've just like squirreled away over a time. Just don't tell Terry. But no, just been trying out one of these,
Oh,
which is
cool.
an Instax wide Evo. Just done a video on it actually.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, I did a similar thing. I thought the watershed moment was I went to lucky enough to we went to Vietnam in February, early
yeah,
February, on holiday, and I didn't take a single picture. I had my Sony in my bag all the time. Didn't take a
yeah,
picture,
yeah,
and I think there's some psychological link to my Sony kit and being work, and I love it for work, and it's absolutely brilliant.
yeah,
And but I think it just feels like I'm working. So I did decide I've got to sort this out because going to somewhere beautiful like that and not taking any pictures is a
yeah,
bit of a crime, really. So I've just got an XT5, so I've gone into sort of done a
yeah.
Fujifilm route of, back to that Olympus kind of idea of having something a bit smaller, a bit lighter,
Hmm.
and something that is just got a bit more personality, I think, for personal stuff. And so I'm really enjoying that. I love that
Yeah,
that system,
and
and yeah,
like I'm in a similar position at the moment. Because the one that I'm going to be getting for myself just for fun is the Fujifilm XM5. Again, it's purely just have that nice small, just something I can take out without being kind of the family member or the friend person in the friendship group that does videos and content creation. But this in particular, you can send photos that you can take out of your professional cameras to it and then print it out because this is the thing that I
oh wow,
find really you know what I find quite hard is just kind of show you
oh
so that's
cool,
a photo I took and just send it to there,
oh
but you
that's
can
good,
also take photos with it as well.
yeah.
And it kind of like I think there's something about having something physical opposed to something digital which I find a little bit more magical
Mm.
for just personal stuff,
Yeah.
but yeah.
But I think that's why people get into often you find photographers get into film photography, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
often a similar reason, isn't it? That it's something completely different. It makes them a bit more thoughtful about every frame they're going to capture.
Mm,
You're not just spraying sort of 500 shots at something. You're kind of being a bit more thoughtful about it, and it's a different process.
yeah.
It's a bit slower, and it fulfills that kind of creative need that is too easy to lose if you're not careful.
Yeah, no, for sure,
You know?
for sure. And like I said, I think Fuji are actually well, like I didn't actually say yet, but Fuji in particular have a really unique place in the market because um the Sony cameras are fantastic and all of that, but the Fuji just feel like they've got a little bit more personality,
Mm.
a little bit more soul. But the thing is that they're just not as reliable as having a Sony camera, but because they're not as reliable, I find them more fun.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
I mean,
don't
I
know
was
about you.
expecting because I was expecting this the same, and I did get the those LR lenses, the
Yeah,
so I got a couple of those, and they are really fast, and I was expecting much more sluggish from what I'd read and what I'd heard, much more
yeah.
sluggish autofocus. They're pretty quick, the autofocus is really good. It's not there with Sony, but then it's half the weight. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
so I'm sure I could shoot weddings on them, and people do all the time, don't they? But
yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
me, it's not. I almost kind of am tempted to try it for a wedding, but then
Yeah.
I don't want to because I want to keep it just for fun.
Yeah,
You know,
well, I've
so
heard a number of people look to take the X100s, whatever,
Mm.
to weddings, and I can see the kind of like the benefit of it because like sometimes at weddings, and I don't know if you find this, it's like you're stuck as the photographer and people kind of like freeze in front of you. And what I've heard when people using something like the X100 or something smaller is that it feels a little bit like they feel a little bit more at ease in front of people, and
Yeah.
that they feel more at ease around you as well,
But that's the
rather
great
than
thing I found with mirrorless full stop is being able to approach a group at least with just back button eye autofocus and actually have a conversation with somebody and approach them rather than approaching them with a great big full frame DSLR in front of your face where they can't even see. That is a bit kind of over
yeah,
a bit much sometimes.
yeah, no, for sure, for sure, for
What do you think
sure.
about that GFX 100, the medium
The
format?
RF.
Yeah.
Can't wait to give it a go. Still waiting on our kind of like demo thing.
Mm,
Um, I think it was something that was always going to end up being in the industry and being something. Basically, it's Fujifilm's kind of like, hey, don't spend this much money on a Leica when you can actually have a bigger frame
mm,
with a camera. But like the thing with it is that it doesn't have a super fast aperture lens. They've tried to make it as compact as possible.
yeah.
And with that, of course, the lens is a lot like isn't the
What's
right
the aperture on it again? Is
better.
it
It's an f4.35 or something like that.
yeah,
It's
so
a
it's
little
about a
bit.
3.2 equivalent or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
you know,
28 mil, yeah.
it's a little bit, it's. But again, this is medium format. Most medium format lenses are around about an f4 anyway.
Yeah.
It's cool. I really like the GFX. I do want to use it. My dream thing would be to actually use the GFX as a main camera. I tested it out recently, but the trouble is the autofocus isn't there, and their medium format glass has very kind of like there's a lot of vibration in the motors and stuff like that.
Oh, is that right?
Well, at least it was the one that I was testing
Mm,
anyway. So like it's really cool. I think the GFX is brilliant. I think it's going to be very popular. I don't know if it would be for me. I don't think it's
mm.
something I would want to get, but yeah.
It's
What
intriguing,
about
isn't
you?
it? Well, it's similar that it just makes me want to pick it up and have a go. I'd love to try it. And I think, that for people that have got that kind of money, that's all
Mm,
it can take sometimes to splash and get one, isn't it?
yeah,
And I like the fact that they are doing something different. They've clearly thought, well, there's no point going down a full frame route.
yeah.
That's covered. So at least they got their crop, stuff, which they're, obviously the main body of their stuff and the medium format things, and I think they're kind of keeping quite away from the full frame stuff, and probably that's quite a
Yeah,
sensible
I
idea,
think I
you know?
think they've been chased to be full frame, but you don't need to be that. They just like, okay, everyone else is full frame. Let's go medium
Yeah.
format because there's it's only Hasselblad really on the market there, and they're very expensive. Although
Mm,
GFX is expensive, and the new GFX 100 RF is actually a lot cheaper than having a Leica Q,
sure.
and in many respects, it's a very similar sort of like size profile.
Mm.
So it's an interesting. What about? Should be really talking about more about weddings, but this is what I was talking about with tangents. What about the Sigma BF? What's your thoughts on that?
Tell me what that is.
So Sigma's new kind of like camera. They produce cameras. Not many people like a lot of people know about it, but they're just like, oh yeah, Sigma produce cameras. So it's an L mount camera. You're gonna have to have a look at a photo of it
Mm.
um to see why I'm asking you particularly about it. Um where is it? I have to Sigma BF. Basically what they've done is imagine if Apple created a camera.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Um
Oh wow, yeah. No,
have
I'm
you
looking
are
at it
you
now.
looking
Yeah,
up your
I'm
end? Yeah,
looking at
yeah,
it
yeah.
now. Yeah, it does look like an iMac. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would look really good on an Apple person's desk. I can't really say much. I'm an Apple person, but
Hey, steady. You're
um
talking to an Apple person here.
yeah, no, I used it. I used it the other day. It was a lot of fun. But what I wanted to kind of like get on that is kind of like the other end of design because it's vintage or nothing else. And then Sigma decided to do this kind of like, what if we don't do a vintage camera? What if we make it look like an iMac Pro,
Mm.
but with a sensor?
Yeah, but kudos to them. I think any designers that think, well, let's do something different. That's what I
Yeah,
think just keeps things interesting, and and
yeah,
that's a perfect example of that. That
yeah.
why
No,
do
for
I
sure.
mean, cameras look like cameras for reasons that they don't anymore. That they are no longer relevant, aren't they?
Yeah,
They don't need to be the shape that they are because we don't have the mirror mechanisms and things
yeah.
and prisms. So yeah,
Well, it just comes from back in the day where they had like weird designs for cameras with like, the CCD sensor, like absolutely awful cameras that people were liking more and more because they're quirky and weird, right? And it was just nice to see someone do something just a little bit weirder
yeah.
recently.
So
No,
they do a Leica, so it's Leica L-Log video.
yeah.
Huh, interesting, yeah. Yeah, so that
It's not
how much
really a
is it?
video camera.
I can't see how much it is.
It's
Oh, 1600
1950, yeah, 19 something.
$1,600 on Amazon apparently in the US.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. Wow, it's a lot cheaper than it is here then.
Mm,
Apparently it's more expensive. But they can only make 9 a day globally.
right.
So it's going to be a bit of a rare camera, but it's just an
Yeah.
interesting kind of
No,
like
cool, yeah.
one of those kind of weird camera news kind of things that
Mm.
just kind of get me going, I guess. But
And
yeah,
they've done the same that same thought process, I guess, of they're so far behind in terms of camera bodies. I
yeah,
mean, think about how long Sigma took to become kind of a sort of second rate lens brand, compared even with Tamron
yeah,
and stuff. And now they're, perfectly great lenses. So
yeah.
they'd be so far behind in terms of building a camera system that would rival something like Sony or Fuji.
Yeah,
But
no, for
so
sure.
do
Well,
something different.
they've been doing it for years. It's just it's a very eclectic kind of like group of people that like them a lot.
Mm,
Because they kind of stuck with CCD sensors longer than any other kind of like manufacturer.
yeah.
This isn't CCD, but yeah, no, it's an interesting kind of like
CC
Wales and West is of course back again this year where you're going to get the chance to check out some awesome technology. Also learn from some creative individuals about AI, astrophotography, social media and everything else in between. Getting the chance to not only play but also learn as well. And well, just have a whole heap of fun. This is of course at the ICC down Newport, and make sure you book your tickets now between the 19th and the 21st of June. I'll see you there. Part of that.
it's got some benefits, doesn't it? It's like more like it's
Um,
got some global shutter characteristics when you have a
so
CCD sensor.
yeah, they're essentially almost global shutters. The CMOS sensor basically runs in scan lines,
Mm,
which is where you kind of get a little bit of distortion when it comes to sports, like stuff like that. I think the I had an A7C and it was really bad at that kind of distortion when I'm testing out like these big kind of like nature lenses and I'm looking through the sensor and just like a bird's just gone from like looking like a bird to like looking like, because it's moving so fast. Um, but global shutter is the way forward eventually. It's just the tech's not quite there.
I agree. Totally agree with that summary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, yeah.
And
Anyway,
the
wedding.
benefits of I think the benefits of global shutter are you have to understand a bit more about how photography works to see that they're not all complete benefits. Like for example, the using your flash at any shutter
Yeah,
speed, but then there's a point where your shutter speed's faster than the flash duration, so you're cutting off your flash anyway. So there's kind of pros and cons to a lot of it, and then the base ISO being
oh yeah,
higher
no,
and those sorts of
it's
things.
it's mad. It's great for weddings. Great for flash photographers as well.
Mm,
Just because of the instantaneous kind of you don't get banding with it at all. It's
yeah.
just you get a good image. But explaining that because the thing is like oh, it's got a global shutter, but you need to understand sensors enough to understand what it does.
Mm.
Which
Well, it's
is
that
like a,
classic and that thing, how much more money is that going to make the average wedding photographer? Probably it's not going to make any
no,
more money, is it? So
no,
and it's damn expensive. So it
no,
would make our lives easier. And
yeah.
but that's often a different conversation to like
I mean
we've
that's
all
it.
taken photos with and you've got them back and you think, oh man, it's banding across it. So
Yeah.
to get rid of that would be amazing. But it's would I rather just exclude a few images from a set or pay 8 grand to how much
Yeah,
is
well,
it? The the the
oh,
the, the, the,
it's
the
like
A92.
six, I believe, around six.
Yeah.
Um, realistically, and kind of like coming back to weddings there, and I don't know if you touch upon this when it comes to the stuff that you teach, and that is kind of like gear acquisition syndrome,
Absolutely, yeah.
because there is a, and I found it when I worked in weddings to the point where I was making myself financially unstable because I was just like, I need this. This will help me do a thing. But in this day and age, I think it's a lot cheaper than I think people actually realize to actually get a really powerful camera
Yeah.
that will take amazing photos, even to the quality of the newer stuff. And
Y-
photography in general, I think video is still more expensive, but photography in general, I think is actually incredibly accessible at the moment.
Yeah, I totally agree. Absolutely. I mean, and this is covered in all the Nick Church Academy, business stuff that people say, well, it's got these cameras really expensive, lenses really expensive, but there's not many businesses that where you could start a business with 3-4 grand,
No,
just to buy enough kit to shoot a wedding. You haven't got to buy a van, you haven't got to buy premises, you haven't
yeah,
got any plant. So that it is a really low barrier of entry.
yeah,
But this gear acquisition syndrome it can be a killer. I mean, obviously
yeah.
places like Camera Center rely on it, so you don't want to state it too much.
Uh,
But
yeah, no, it doesn't exist.
yeah,
You need the stuff.
but it's that classic thing.
Buy. No,
I always say to
we're
people,
always very good at getting people what they actually need. Because when I used to be a salesman, I was a good salesman because I really listened to them and actually like understood the best kind of like way for them to get what they're wanting, and also fit within what they're looking to spend as
yeah,
well.
that's the thing. I mean,
Um,
you got to ask. I think for anyone that suffers from gear acquisition syndrome, is to ask yourself, is there a problem with my current kit? Is a first off, because
yeah,
often there isn't, and especially in beginners that have got gear acquisition syndrome, they often are unable to even articulate what the problem is. They,
yeah,
they
for sure,
think
for
this new
sure.
thing's going to solve, so it definitely won't. If you can't even describe what it is, then you don't know enough about whether that new thing's going to do it. And
Mm,
also from professional side, is that going to make me more money? More money is
yeah,
is a really important decision to make. It doesn't mean that you don't buy it. It's just at least you buy it with the knowledge that, oh, actually, this is just a personal thing. I just really want it, and that's different, and
yeah.
that's fine. We're all
Yeah,
passionate about kit.
you're allowed
Yeah,
to want, you're allowed to get things for fun, but you just need to
yeah,
make sure, because the biggest one for me at the moment, and Tyler's going to be telling me off there because he's going to watch through this and be like, you need to stay on subject. Um, they've got a Hasselblad X-Pan in the store at the moment. Do you know what a Hasselblad X-Pan is?
no.
It's an old film camera,
Oh, it's a flip, right?
but
Okay.
it's a medium format 35mm camera.
Mm,
So it takes cinematic ratio things, but it's like 6 grand, and I'm like, I don't need this. And it's so hard to kind of pick that, especially when it comes to like when you're doing it professionally, because like gimbals like end up being a thing you need to buy, and oh, you need to get some constant light or this, but for the most part, if you do things right, you just need a decent camera
mm,
with the specs that you need for that particular thing when it comes to
yeah.
video, or just a decent, because the A7 III is like coming under a grand now. And I'm just there like, why?
I still
People can just
reckon
get
that's
great cameras these
I
days,
reckon
so
that is the
cheap.
best. That's the for about 2 or 3 years. I reckon the A7 III has been the best bang for the buck if you're going into
Yeah.
weddings or something. I mean, people say, "Oh, it's so slow, and the autofocus really slow," but when it came out, that was like the fastest autofocus we'd ever seen.
I
You
remember
know,
being like, this is
I
amazing. I've
know.
never seen autofocus this good. And it just keeps getting better with Sony.
Yeah,
And it's just like, and then you'll just get to the other end because you get to the other end and you're like, oh, I want bad autofocus again because it was more fun.
yeah. It was.
It
Yeah,
wasn't, but it wasn't. It never was fun when it was bad autofocus. But
it made me more creative when I couldn't use the
yeah.
camera properly.
So of course you're going to be at Wales and West this year. What are
Yes.
you going to be talking about?
Well, we covered a bit of it actually. I'm doing a talk called Photography Business Mythbuster.
Ooh.
Photography Business Mythbuster. It's called, I'm gonna get that right. So it's basically about the perceptions that we've got before we start a business about what photography business, what our business is going to be like, what it's going to be, what life as a photographer will be like. We're
Yeah,
going to be shooting at sunset with gorgeous models, handsome guy on the edge of a cliff, and then we'll edit our photos in like a real, swanky cafe the next
yeah,
day. Whereas we don't do any of that stuff. It's just low because we don't do it because there's loads of all the other stuff we have to, all the other hats we have to wear,
yeah,
and So the angle is not, it's not all negative. It's kind of, I think it's really important before you decide you're going to go into it to actually know what it's about, to know the
Mm.
sorts of things you're going to be doing. And that's not because to put people off. It's not some massive gatekeeping kind of drive, but if you know what you're likely to face, what you're going to what you'll be doing, then you can get the skills and systems in place to make sure that you do have some time to remain passionate about photography and do the things that you do want to do with photography. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you're not going to be taking any more photos. You're going to be editing and you're going to be answering emails and you're going to be doing social media. That's what all of us and some accounts. That's what we all
Yeah.
become as photographers. So unless you have systems in place, so we talk about a few of these tips and tricks on.
Mhm.
So we go through some fairly amusing things that some pretty brutal things happened to me when I started because I didn't have this view. I had no idea what it was like to be a photographer.
Yeah.
But then some things that I found have worked really well with that I've put into practice and that I teach in my coaching stuff as well.
Okay.
That really help people save huge quantities of time. That means they can then get into street photography and that kind of thing and keep their
Yeah.
passion for photography alive, which ultimately is what we want to do. We want to love doing our jobs. And we're also lucky
Yeah.
that we've got jobs that are in an industry that we love. The worst thing that could happen is if that turns into just, become a bit of a kind of, cranking the handle to get some photos out.
Yeah.
So
Fair
that's
enough.
what I'm doing. Yeah. So it's on the Friday, is it 20th?
Yeah.
20th.
Friday 20th. Sounds
Yeah.
about right.
Yeah, 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
That's on the fundamental stage.
That sounds exciting, man. I will hopefully be able to capture it catch it on the day. Really looking forward to seeing you there, man. It's going to be a pretty awesome just event in general.
Yeah, looking
Um,
forward to it.
Before we kind of like end things, because like I'm trying to make sure I keep within like control, and now we have no time limit on Zoom, so I'm like, oh, let's talk about this. But no, is there any advice that you would give to anybody starting out doing photography?
Is absolutely work out before you start or before you start branding yourself, work out what you're passionate about with photography. We're all passionate about different stuff. Identify what it is. What's your why for doing it? What is it that makes you think, oh, I would love to do that? I really love photography. Why do you love it? Because if you can communicate that through all of your branding, website, social media comms, everything else, then you're going to succeed because that's what people buy. As we now know, in most fields of photography, let's say wedding photography, where most of the commercial money spent on photography, most money spent on photography in this country is in weddings. So if you take off commercial photography, it's about 90%. That's where the money
Yeah.
goes is weddings. So, but most couples, same with most families, to most of them, once we're above a certain level of photography, all of our photos look pretty much the same. So they are absolutely not buying what we do. So you have to give them something else. And they're buying why we do it. They're buying that
Yeah.
personality, that connection they've got with the passion we've got.
Yeah.
And not everyone will resonate with the same person. That's why there's a market for every photographer. We don't need to
Yeah.
worry about too many photographers because it just means different people will. But if you can communicate that really clearly and successfully, and it's easier, right? Because it means when you're talking about stuff, like I'm now, I'm passionate about this stuff. You can
Yeah.
tell, and it just makes it easier. I haven't got to think, oh,
Yeah, for
I've
sure.
got to say this. I've got to make it sound like I mean this, or you just be yourself, and that means people are going to much more. People can sense authenticity really easily,
Yeah.
and they'll buy it, and that's what you can get people. So get that sorted really quickly, early on.
Yeah.
Just decide what your reason for your why is. Also, decide on your goals. Where do you want to be?
Yeah.
Where do you need to be? If you're leaving a job or you're going part-time, then you need there's got to be some financial goals you have to hit. And then make sure that everything you do in a day is getting you closer to those goals. Because often when I do this exercise with people, so often the time they're spending isn't doing anything towards their goals. They just decide what their goals are. Then they tell us that, then we work out what they're doing with their time, and there's no interconnect at all. So that's the other thing is to decide what are you actually, make sure every 10 minutes you spend is getting a little bit closer to those goals. Doesn't matter what it is, and if you're busy with a day job and photography is a site, something you're building up in the
Yeah.
background, if you've got 20 minutes in a day, send an email to another photographer or 5 photographers and ask
Yeah.
if you can do something that gets you a bit closer, and it just feels really good because you're making progress.
Yeah, no, definitely.
That's
I mean,
what I
it's all kind of about progress, isn't it?
Yeah.
That was a really interesting kind of point of view of that. And I asked that question of pretty much all the guests that I actually have on here because it's interesting to see kind of like different people because different things because like some people are like, oh, getting to do wedding photography because wedding photography kind of encapsulates so many genres. You can really find out what you really in love doing. Or, I got into it because I was taking photos because of my dog and stuff. It's mad to see kind of like everyone's kind of like opinions when it comes to
Yeah, and
that.
I think those things are also true. Yeah, but you're right. Everyone's got a different view. I
Yeah,
think it is
everyone's got a
important to
different
start. I
view.
think most of us, when we start, certainly I did, and I know a lot of people do. When you start, you do just do loads of things. You photograph a couple of bands and some people. Then you do a couple of baby. You shoot those babies
Yeah.
in and think, right, not doing that again. And then you do families and weddings, and you decide what ticks the box in terms of the things you love doing and what doesn't. And wedding photography is absolutely great for building skills. In all sorts of things like flash, portraiture. You do all of it at weddings,
Yeah.
events, but you also have to do loads of stuff like managing big groups of people and
Yeah.
being sociable and all those things. And if that isn't you, if that is because we're not all the
Yeah.
same, if you're much more introverted, I'm not particularly, I'm quite introverted, believe it or not, despite the fact we're talking all the time. So I know I can do a wedding, but I do find it harder socially than other people to do it. So if I was much more introverted than I am, then wedding photography would be a nightmare. It'd probably put me off photography for good because you'd just be exhausted. Your social batteries would be flat all the time. So I think weddings are great for skills, but you have to work out, is a wedding environment something you want to do? It's high pressured. If you're
Yes.
photographing some ball bearings or some tools for a
Yeah.
company, then it's no pressure at all. You can, if you cock it up, you do it again. But weddings, you have to
Yeah.
get it right pretty much first time, and you have to
Yeah.
be able to run with the punches a little bit more than you would other types of
And
shoots. So
and in that retrospect, it's always quite worrying. I feel like we probably do another one on that kind of like your experience and kind of being a wedding photographer, but we kind of like have covered, I think, most of the things we've needed to.
oh well.
Um, in which it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on. It would be cool to have you on again because it's been so fun. Yeah, if you enjoyed the video, please like, follow, subscribe if you want to see more. Is there anything you want to put onto the end of this?
Yeah, if we,
Uh,
if anyone's interested in the academy, the Nick Church Creative Academy, just head to nickchurchcreativeacademy.com and there's those details there. So that's going to be online courses, in-person workshops, digital products, and also a community where we can collaborate and learn photography together without the distractions of social media. Because I'm finding my Facebook feed pretty brutal at the
yeah.
moment of stuff that's really distracting. So,
I'm getting fed up of just like AI everything at the
oh yeah,
moment.
tell me about it. Yeah.
And could probably talk for another half hour about kind of like why it's becoming more and more important to be authentic.
Mm, indeed.
For sure, because it's just a world where it's just like that kind of aspect of everything is just kind of gone. I'm gonna get into another 30 minutes and get told off. Anyway, it's been a pleasure, man. Look to have you
Yeah,
on
you too.
again. Can't wait for Wales and West. I'll be there. You'll be there, right? Just make sure you click
Absolutely.
in down below. And yeah, see you soon.